Election Information, International and Philippine View. First, history of voting. Since approximately 508 BC, Greece implemented the earliest form of democracy, which is the negative voting. In this type of voting, male landowners are only allowed to vote candidates that they most wanted to be exiled for 10 years. The one who got more than 6,000 votes are the one ostracized. If all the candidates doesn't get 6,000 plus, all then remains in place. Medieval Venice implements the approval voting during the 13th century. The Venetian state solidified and elected a great council comprised of 40 members. In this type of election, electors cast one vote for every candidate they found acceptable and none for those they found unacceptable. The winner was the person who was acceptable to the largest number of voters. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote in 1920. This amendment resulted from an international movement of suffragettes. However, around the world, women have not always fared as well. Women still lack the right to vote in Switzerland until the 1970s. And as of 1990, women could not vote in Kuwait. There are many other countries where women and citizens still have not attained the privilege of voting. In 1971, with the backdrop of the Vietnam War, many U.S. citizens felt that if you were old enough to be drafted into the military to serve your country, then you were certainly old enough to vote. The 26th Amendment was passed and lowered the voting age from 21 to 18.
Types of electoral system. O'Neill, 1993. There are three main categories in electoral system. Ito ay ang majoritarian, proportional, at mixed system. In majoritarian system, the candidates who have the most votes is declared as a winner. There are three types of majoritarian system. Una ay ang single-member plurality system. Simple rather than absolute majorities are sufficient to determine the victor of an electoral race. The winner need only receive the most vote cast. The US, Canada, New Zealand, and United Kingdom are using this system. Second, multi-member plurality system. More than one representative from each electoral district may be sent to the assembly. In this system, voters check as many names as there are open seats in their ballots. Ang kandidatong may pinakamaraming boto are deemed elected. At ang pangatlo ay ang single-member majoritarian system. Aims to ensure that the winning candidate get their support of an absolute majority voters in contrast sa dalawang sistemang nabanggit kanina. The second category in electoral system ay ang proportional representation or PR. PR systems are particularly created to distribute seats in proportion to votes. In modern Western democracies, PR systems are most often employed electoral system. All PR systems rely on multi-member districts because under PR, political parties are allotted a number of seats in parliament equal to the level of support they have garnered in a particular district. May dalawang kategorya ang PR system. Ito ay ang party list system at single transferable votes system. Sa party list system, voters in an electoral district select from slates of candidates presented by numerous parties running for office. After the votes are counted, each party is entitled to send to the legislature the number of representatives from each slate that correspond to each percentage of the popular vote. For instance, if a particular party receives 30% of the vote, it would send 3 representatives from a list of 10 candidates. Single transferable vote system or STV system places more emphasis on the individual candidate than the party, in contrast to the party list system. The candidates whose name on the ballot are requested to be marked in order of preference by the electorate. Sorting the ballots based on the preference come first when they are being counted. A candidate must receive a minimum number of votes in order to get elected. Candidates who reach the number required of votes in the initial round of counting are declared elected, and any votes they obtain in excess of that number are reallocated in accordance with the second choices that were indicated. These surplus votes are redistributed in the second round of counting, at which point the candidates who met the required number of votes were again declared victorious. Until the seat is full, this process is repeated. Lastly, sa electoral ay ang mixed system. In order to get the advantages of both, some countries have chosen to combine the majority and the proportional representation system. Historical development of electoral system in the Philippines. May 17 direct presidential elections na ang naganap sa ating bansa. Ito ay noong 1935, 1941, 1946, 1949, 1953, 1957, 1961, 1965, 1969, 1981, 1986, 1992, 1998, 2004, 2010, 2016, at ngayong taong 2022. Each of them also featured vice presidential elections, with the exception of 1981. In 1899, there was a Tejeros Convention. The Tejeros Convention, also known as the Tejeros Assembly and the Tejeros Congress, was a meeting held on March 22, 1897, between Katipunan factions of the Magdiwang and the Magdalo in San Francisco de Malabon, now known as General Trias. That resulted in the creation of a new revolutionary government that took charge of the Philippine Revolution, replacing the Katipunan. It followed on a previous meeting now known as the Imus Assembly. Filipino historians consider the first presidential and vice presidential elections in the Philippine history to have been held in the convention, although only Katipuneros were able to take part and not the general. 1934 Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as the Philippine Independence Act, ay isang federal law ng US that set the procedure for the Philippines, then an American colony, to become a country following a 10-year transition period. On 1935, right of suffrage limited to men. On September 16, 1935, the Philippines held its presidential and vice presidential elections. Only men has the right to suffrage on the election of 1935. Senate President Manuel Quezon won a lopsided victory against former President Emilio Aguinaldo. Sergio Osmeña emerged victorious in the election for the Vice President of the Philippines. Then on 1937, the women can vote. Then on 1937, legalization of women's suffrage in the country, because the 1935 Constitution only allows Filipino men ages 21 or older to have the right of suffrage until there's activism for women of suffrage in our country. At noong September 17, 1937, as the Philippine President of the Philippine Commonwealth, Manuel Quezon, signed it into the law under Proclamation Number 140. Then on 2010, first fully automated election on the Philippine history in accordance with Republic Act 9369, an act authorizing the Commission on Elections to use the automated election system. In the May 11, 1998 election of local and national, and in subsequent national and local electoral exercises, this election marked the first time that Commission election fully automated elections. The 2016 Vice Presidency recount, vote threshold. In the discussion of vote recount, the Presidential Electoral Tribunal or PET on the September 19, 2018 ruled in favor of the 25% ballot shading threshold in the recount of 2016 vice presidential race. 2022, the recent presidential election, the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, or PPCRV, has been keeping an eye on voting turnout and has detected any irregularities. PPCRV Chairman Myla Villanueva stated that they consulted academic statisticians and they found out any irregularities in the 6832 pattern on votes. PPCRV spokesperson Van de la Cruz said that the 6832 trend is no cause for concern.
Electoral system used in Philippines. Generally, Philippines used mixed systems. House of Representatives. The Philippines uses parallel voting for its lower house elections. For this election, there shall be 316 seats in the House of Representatives. 253 of these are district representatives, and 63 are party list representatives. Senate. Elections to the Senate of the Philippines are done via plurality at large voting. A voter can vote for up to 12 candidates, with the 12 candidates with the highest number of votes being elected. President and Vice President. The first past the post voting system is used to determine the winner. The candidate with the highest number of votes, whether or not one has a majority, wins the presidency. First past the post is a plurality voting system. The candidate who wins the most votes in each constituency is elected. The first preference, voters may then choose to express further preferences for as many or as few candidates as they wish. The count begins by allocating votes in line with first preferences. The Cabinet. Appointment of Cabinet Secretaries. According to the Article 7, Section 16, the President may appoint anyone to executive departments with the consent of the Commission on Appointments. Chief Justice and Associate Justice. The Chief Justice and Associate Justices are appointed by the President of the Philippines, chosen from a short list submitted by the Judicial and Bar Council. The President must fill up a vacancy within 90 days of occurrence. BARM, Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Based on the organic law, the autonomous Bangsamoro government system is parliamentary democratic, similar to that practiced in the United Kingdom, which is based on a political party system. The Bangsamoro cabinet is composed of 2 deputy chief ministers and ministers from the members of the parliament. The deputy chief ministers are selected through nomination of the chief minister and are elected by the members of the parliament. The ministers in the cabinet, on their part, are appointed by the chief minister. The Council of Leaders advises the chief minister on matters of governance of the autonomous region. It is roughly an equivalent of an elected Senate, though only advisory, without legislative powers, and not part of the parliament.
The electoral exercises in the United States of America, Democrats and Republicans remain the 2 leading parties in our country. However, there are other political parties such as the Independent Party, the Reform Party, the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Socialist Party, the Populist Party, and others. You are directly electing that individual when you vote for a mayor, senator, representative in the House of Representatives, judge, etc. When you cast your ballot for a president, you are actually choosing an elector who has vowed to support that candidate. The Electoral College is made up of the electors selected by each states. They are the ones who choose the president and vice president in a formal election. In the Electoral College, each state has the same number of votes as senators and representatives. For instance, Utah has 5 electoral votes because it has 2 senators and 3 members of the House of Representatives. More than 50 electoral votes are available to large states like California. States with a tiny population such as Alaska. A presidential contender needs to win enough electoral college votes from each state, more than half of the total, to be declared the winner. Even while the American public knows who will win the presidency on election day in November, that person is not yet formally recognized as the winner. The official meeting of the Electoral College is in December. Its votes are sent to the U.S. in a sealed envelope. Senate, the results are revealed to Senate by the current Vice President of the United States when Congress convenes in January. The actual election of the President and Vice President takes place at this specific time. Next, we will go to the Philippines. Voters can vote 1 President, 1 Vice President, 12 Senators, 1 for House of Representatives per districts, 1 for House of Representatives for party list, 1 Governor, 1 Vice Governor, 1 to 7 board members, 1 Mayor, 1 Vice Mayor. The number of elective councilor or sangguniang panlungsod members in the Metro Manila area, the City of Cebu, City of Davao, and any other city with 2 or more representative districts shall continue to be governed by the provisions of Sections 2 and 3 of Republic Act No. 6636, provided that the municipalities of Malabon, Navotas, San Juan, Mandaluyong, Muntinlupa, Las Piñas, and Taguig shall have 12 councilors, and Pateros 10. For the province with 2 or more representative districts, the number of elective members of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan shall be equally divided among them, provided that if equal division is not possible, the remaining members shall be elected in the district of districts with a greater number of voters, or if they be the same, with a greater number of population. A coalition government must be formed in the Philippines multi-party system, where there are many parties and no single party typically has a chance to win power on its own. The elections are overseen by the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC.
Process of election. In the Philippines, it is an obligation of every qualified citizen to register for voting. The process of election in the Philippines are chronologically as follows: voters registration, filing of certificate of candidacies, absentee voting for overseas voters, absentee voting for local voters, election day voting for all non-absentee voters, canvassing of votes, proclamation of President and Vice President-elect, and the term of office of winning candidates, which commence 30th of June at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Qualifications to register and to vote. Any Filipino citizen who is at least 18 years of age, a resident of the Philippines for at least 1 year, and in the place where they intend to vote for at least 6 months. Immediately preceding the election, can file application for registration. There are 2 types of voter registration: the computerized voters list, which is processed electronically, and the voters registration record, the manual one. Every Filipino citizen who is 18 years of age or older on election day has lived in the Philippines for at least a year and at least 6 months in the area where they are registered, and is not otherwise barred from voting by law, is eligible to cast a ballot. A citizen must register in order to cast a ballot. Prior to the election, the COMELEC has registration period that lasts for several months. Despite being entitled to vote, those who are not registered do not appear on the voters list and are therefore unable to do so. There are 3 kinds of voters: youth voters, adult voters, and absentee voters. Youth voters are Filipinos who are at least 15 years old on or before the elections but not more than 30 years of age can register for the SK elections. They also need to have resided in the barangay for not less than 6 months. For adult voters, those are at least 18 years of age and shall have resided in the Philippines for at least 1 year, and in the place wherein they propose to vote for at least 6 months immediately preceding the election. No literacy, property, or other substantive requirements shall be imposed on the exercise of suffrage. The last one is the absentee voters, which is divided into two categories: local absentee voters and overseas absentee voters. Local absentee voters are those who are at work on election day. These include police officers, soldiers, and other types of government workers. Overseas absentee voters, on the other hand, are Filipinos living abroad who cast absentee ballots from abroad. However, only national positions such as President, Vice President, Senators, and party list representatives are up for election to which they are entitled. Voting for overseas absentee voters is permitted in the Philippine embassies and consulates, and it can start up to 4 months before the election. In a very rare cases, the voting process can go up to 6 months.
Conclusion. Throughout the Philippine election history, the researchers found out that like any other aspect of society, election has to evolve from traditional to be capable of adapting to modern automated technologies. As per Clarity, keeping the traditional system of vote counting alongside with automated system is a good way in order to verify election results and check irregularities. Election is crucial part of democracy because the majority chooses who they wanted to be leader. Doors of improvement for voting and election system will always be open for our democratic society.
For the recommendations, comment bills that will protect the votes of small sector of society. Accessible voting, utilities for indigenous people. Clarity on vote threshold, rules in the Constitution. There must be a certain vote threshold that a vote is deemed to be acceptable, and that rule is backed up by the Constitution.